Hello, this is JC Glick, the CEO of the Commit Foundation. And today on the podcast, what we're going to talk about is the difference between citizen and civilian. Last week we talked about the transformation that occurs from being a civilian to being a warrior. And we talked about that same transformation needing to happen when we move on to getting out of the military, right? How do we transform when we get out of the military, right? And we call it transition right now. And the truth of the matter is, transition isn't enough. Transition is a state. We need a transformation. And in an article that I wrote that came out in Havoc Journal today, it talks about the transformation from warrior to civilian. Because spoiler alert, the way I think it needs to happen is we make this transformation of civilian to warrior, and then we need to make another transformation from warrior to citizen. And immediately I started to think about, okay, so what do I see the difference between a civilian and a citizen? And, I started thinking about Robert Heinlein's, what's the movie? Robert Heinlein. It's about aliens. All right, it'll come to me. It became a movie. It's a great book. And Starship Troopers. Man, I don't know. That's what happens when you get to be 50-something years old. But Robert Heinlein talked about, in that world, and if you've ever read the book Starship Troopers, it's not like the movie. It really is a political science book. And what he talks about is to be a citizen of the world, you had to serve. And in Robert Heinlein's world, you had to serve in the military. And it's an interesting concept. And probably when I was I thought that was the right kind of answer. Like everyone should have to serve in the military. And personally, I've kind of switched that. I do think that everyone should serve, but I don't necessarily think everyone should serve in the military. And when I think of citizen, what I'm thinking about is somebody who contributes and interacts with their ecosystem, right? So if we think about a civilian, that's just somebody who's not in the military, right? They've never have been. They're just not in the military. And I think that most people, or some people, and maybe it's the majority of people, and maybe you served as a kid in scouts, or you served your community by giving volunteer hours, et cetera. And maybe you were a citizen before you came into the military. And that's great. I think that there are those individuals that, come into the military and they have not really served anyone. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that the majority of the folks that come into the military, let's say 18, 17 to 25. I know that there's other demographics that go in different times, but I'm just gonna for the sake of this conversation, let's talk about those. I think that when they come in, rightly so, they think about themselves. We're still trying to figure out our identity at those ages, right? And we're trying to think about our identity at a time when, honestly, we don't have the prefrontal cortex. Our brain is not fully functioned yet to make decisions in a meaningful way. And so, I say this as a father of a number of 20 of a bunch of people in their 20s, and the stepfather of a whole bunch of people in their 20s. You are thinking about yourself right now, who you are, what your purpose is, and who your community is, and you're testing up a bunch of stuff, and you're trying things, and that's important. And I think that when you come into the military as that civilian, just somebody who hasn't served before, now you're coming in to serve, we provide you that identity. We, the military, provides you that identity, purpose, and community. And that's a huge gift for most young people. And it's something to really grab onto. And what's nice is we continue to reinforce it throughout somebody's career. We continue to instill in them these values of selfless service, these values of others before self, these values of mission first, people always. And it's a wonderful thing. The problem that I think there is after we've just instilled all these great ideas and all this great training in you, we then say in about 3 days, like, hey, good luck. Here's how you get to your benefits. Extremely important. You should know where your VA stuff. You should know your GI Bill stuff. Everybody's doing a good job. Everybody's doing what's right. But I think that all we say is take all this good stuff that we've given you and go use it out there. It's a wonderful sentiment, and I appreciate it. But I don't think it sets you up enough to truly be a citizen. Because now let's go back to when we were in our 20s. We were searching for that identity, purpose, and community. Well, we've now done anywhere from 5 to 20 years, 30 years, and now we're searching for that same thing all over again. And it does require transformation. It does require some reflection on saying, okay, who am I? And who do I want to be? Who do I aspire to be? And yes, all those things that I became while I was in the military, a lot of those things are really, really good and translate very, very well outside of the military. But some of those things, they don't translate. They might have been good for the military, but they're not good as you continue to move on. And I think that we have to recognize that. And we have to think about what are those things that I want to continue to bring forward with me. And I mean, look, and I'm as guilty of this as anybody, but I think we've all met those individuals who continue to use those military phrases after they've left. And sometimes it's just the easier way of talking because it's the way you've talked for so long. And sometimes maybe it's a virtue signal of, hey, I was there, I did this. And we've all done it. I do it. To do it to this day. This is not a judgment. This is just something that I think that we have to think about and be cognizant of, right? And our purpose, right? I mean, I think to a certain extent, with just a transition, you are focused on again being a civilian, not a citizen, right? Because our purpose we now think has to be towards something else, right? And a lot of times that something else is very good, right? It's I got to take care of my family. I got to take care of somebody who I've neglected or whatever. And we do make some assumptions on that too. But I think if we really look at it, we can say, okay, I can serve others while I get my needs met, because that's what you did in service. Okay, you were getting your needs met. I mean, we can say it was completely selfless. It wasn't, right? We got something out of it. There's a pride to giving to others. There's a satisfaction in being selfless. There's a happiness. And I think that we can continue to serve others and serve ourselves and serve our own needs. It is not a binary choice that I can take care of my family and give them their needs and spend time with them and that does something for me as well. And I can provide for my community. And hopefully I can figure out a way to marry those two things together. And most of the time I can. And then it goes back to community, right? For the first time, when we become citizens, we get to choose our community, which is interesting because if you think about it, your entire time in the military, you were given your community, who you It's who you got assigned with, right? It's who you met in schools and then stayed in touch with. It's who you got assigned with. It's who you went to war with. It's who you flew with. It's who you clean latrines with. Well, you get out and nobody's handing you a community. You go find your community, right? And you go. Sometimes it's where you get to pick where you get to live, and sometimes it's activities, and if you're in some cases, I mean, you could argue if you have like kids in sports, sometimes your community is given to you, right? I mean, who hasn't been part of a travel team where now all of a sudden you're in a hotel with a bunch of parents that you probably wouldn't have met had it not been for lacrosse or soccer or volleyball. But I think that the difference between just being a civilian when you first come in and being a citizen is the application of the things that you've learned over the course of your life. Let's look at your life course perspective and applying them appropriately to your ecosystem. And look, do I think that this is unique for military people? I do not. I think that you can, go to college, not go to college, go into a trade, go into work. I think that anybody can become a citizen. But I think that to become a citizen is a deliberate act, right? And I'm not talking about the legal definition of citizen or what we're talking today about in so much of the news about citizenship. I think what we're talking about is the ability to understand your role in an ecosystem and do what you can for that ecosystem. I read a book not too long ago, um, The Web of Life by Dr. Capra. And what he talks about, he makes this interesting analogy of white blood cells. White blood cells have cognition. And in that they know what they are and they know what they're supposed to do. Right. So a white blood cell knows what it's supposed to attach to and not attach to. It knows what it's supposed to do to defeat infection and where it doesn't, it doesn't go on to. And the only time that the communication gets skewed is if there's a bad chemical signal, meaning it's miscommunicated. Right. But they know what they do and what they're supposed to do, what they are. And it's interesting because white blood cells are really, really special. They're special because of what they do. But if they didn't know what they were supposed to do and they didn't do it, they're just another cell, right? They're not special. They're not contributing to the community. They're just another cell. And when we look at our role in community, in the world, in our country, what makes us special and unique is our ability to understand what our role is, right? And I don't mean a role as in, well, I'm the bus driver and I drive the bus and this. No, no, no. It's much deeper than that. That's too sophomoric a way to think about it. I think what you have to think about is how do I make things better than they were when I got there? How do I leave improvement, not legacy, but improvement on the world around me? How do I make someone's life better? How do I interact with the community in a positive way that is unique only to me? We can make the argument that, you're unique in being. We can make that argument. I would say we're different. Unless we interact with the community around us, we're just different. I mean, 99.9% of our DNA is all the same. So, is there a portion of you that's unique? Maybe the way you think is unique, but no one knows how you think unless you interact with the community. So, you're just different. If you want to be unique, you've got to understand your ecosystem and you've got to interact with it. And I think that's what citizens do. I think citizens are part of their community. And we have a great DVS who I was talking to, Adrian, yesterday. And she said, they contribute, they don't just consume. And I think that's important, right? To contribute, not just consume. And that's what being a citizen is. And I think, we have a lot of talk about legal definitions, and we have a lot of political talk and upheaval right now. Mm, That's not what this is about. What this is about is, how do you transform into something that contributes and doesn't just consume? It takes reflection. It takes understanding. And oh, by the way, you might get it wrong a couple of times. You might try something and say, this is the way to do it. Maybe it doesn't feel authentic. Maybe it's not what's right for you. So maybe you try a little bit harder, because we tend to be a little bit pig-headed and stubborn as humans. And it still doesn't work. Well, then we back up a little bit and try something else. And that's the transformation process. And I'm going to talk about it just from, leaving the military. But I believe that this transformation is a constant for those privileged enough to take the time to reflect and think, to review their ecosystem, to understand the microsystem, the mesosystem, right? To understand all levels of it, because they're looking and they're paying attention and they're curious and they're asking questions and they're humble, right? I remember as a kid, I had the funniest line, and I've used it ever since. Hey, we're all just extras in his movie of life. Well, we're all heroes in our movie of life, right? I mean, we're all the main character and we're all the hero, right? Nobody's the villain. Nobody, it's always about you in your movie of life. And I think that transition to citizen that happens is when it's not just about you. It's about what you can contribute to everyone else, right? I think there's incredible freedom in that. And I think it takes a deliberate practice, right? Can you do it on your own? Absolutely. Um, I'm proud to be part of the Commit Foundation, where that's kind of what we help people do, right? We help people transform, right? We empower them. We empower those that have served to find their identity, to find their purpose, and to find their community. We give them the holding space to look at the world, to understand their ecosystem, an ecosystem that they have not been a part of. And I mean, think about this. Think about, we just jump into something. I mean, we wouldn't do that in the military. We would do intelligence preparation of the battlefield. We would have plans. We would know about what we were getting into, knowing that the truth was going to change when we got on the ground. But we would understand, or do our best to understand, the environment. And part of that, as you've done any military planning at all, is kind of doing the SWOT analysis of, who am I? What are the biases that I'm coming in? What are the things that I'm bringing with me? What are the things that I need to leave behind? I think what's fun about what we do at Commit is we help that transformation, right? We help think with you, as almost a Sherpa would. What does this new world look like? Might be one of the best things that we do is have these conversations. It's funny, when people talk about how great Commit is, they talk about, either our DVSs or our coaches or the workshops, and they are all great, right? Any of the program is terrific, or people are terrific. But what they don't understand is that Commit, what's terrific is the people that we select to go through Commit, the people that we select as fellows. That's what's terrific, because If you select the wrong people, they can't do the process of transformation. It takes a deliberate decision to say, I'm not going to transition, I'm going to transform. I'm going to continue to serve. I'm going to continue to have impact. And I'm going to become who I aspire to be. I'm going to take the things that I've learned that I want to bring forward, and I'm going to take the things that I've learned and leave them behind. That takes a deliberate person. So again, do I think Commit's a fantastic organization? Of course I do. I think we're unique in what we do. I think we are the only organization that does transformation, not transition assistance. But I think there's a lot of good organizations out there. And I think a lot of people just need transition assistance because maybe they're where they need to be. Maybe. Maybe they're not ready to do the transformation. Transformation is hard work, right? I mean, we've got our last kid of, 6 between my wife and I. We each came into the marriage with 3. And our last one is about to go into college. And there's a transformation that's got to occur. And it's painful because you may be transitioning from high school to college, but there's a transformation that needs to happen from being a high school student to being a college student. And, we hope as parents that we've helped them to make that transformation, but you don't know. Because as much as you try to make it deliberate, arguably it's as deliberate as you can make it as a parent. And I think that when we go back to kind of thinking about this civilian to warrior, warrior to citizen transformation, I think what you realize is transformation takes investment. It's hard. It takes investment from the outside, and that we recognize that it needs to happen, and we create the holding space, and we create the systems, and we create the processes that help that transformation. And I think it's hard from the individual standpoint to actually, one, decide they're going to do it, and two, go through it. Transformation is hard. And sometimes you got to go through a bunch of transitions to get through transformation. It's not easy. I think in future episodes of this podcast, we will actually talk to not just military folks, but members of the community that had a number of transitions, and then they ended up seeing that they had to transform. And sometimes they transformed in stride, and sometimes they had to take a deliberate pause to recognize that transformation was necessary for the next step. And, I think when we talk about transformation and citizenship, I think that whether you're a high schooler or in college or getting out of the military or changing or becoming a contributing adult, I think the goal that we should all want is to transform into a citizen, to transform into somebody who contributes and doesn't just consume, to give back, to interact with our ecosystem in a meaningful way, where we listen to each other, where we lift each other while we all climb, where we care about each other. So, as I leave you today, what I'd like you to think about is, what are the transformations that you've done? And how have you moved through your life? Was there a time when you moved from civilian to citizen? Was there a time that you think maybe you've moved from warrior to citizen? Do you think that maybe you still need some transformation to become a full citizen, that some powers exist that prevent you from from really, kind of making that step. And again, to define a full citizen, I would just say it's somebody who's trying to interact with their ecosystem in a positive way. I don't know that a citizen is always successful in that. I think many times we are not successful, but I think intent matters. And I think if your intent is to be a contributing citizen, I think you will be, not just a civilian. So um, I appreciate anybody that joined for the live today. I appreciate for anyone that listens to this episode. We have more episodes coming up. And I promise we will, though there will always be a tie to transformation, it won't always be so transformation heavy. And please keep listening. And look, if you can be a citizen and help commit, that would be wonderful. And there are many ways to help with your time, with your experience, or with your treasure. I have two jobs as a CEO. I have to run the organization and I have to fund the organization. I'm going to tell you that of the two, running the organization is not hard. The people that are on this team are absolutely spectacular. And quite honestly, they don't need me. But funding the organization, and I have a great funding team, but funding the organization is one of the tougher things that I do. And as I said during this podcast, transformation takes investment. It's not just time. We need the resources to be able to provide this holding space for those that are trying to make that deliberate transformation to citizen. So if you have the ability, please go to commit.org, commitfoundation.org. Sorry, I should know my own website, commitfoundation.org. Go to that donate button. And if you can give what you can, that would be a huge help to us, and we'd appreciate it. And again, if this sounds like a program for you, go to commitfoundation.org and go hit right next to that button is the apply button. Spend some time on that application because it matters. And I hope to hear from you all soon. If there's something you'd like to hear, please reach out. We'd love to know if there's any particular topics that you think would be helpful. Hey, have a great week. Thanks for listening and take care.